Welcome to another exciting episode of the Insurance Untangled Podcast. I am Naren, and one of the co-hosts of this podcast, dedicated to helping practices that are tangled up with insurance. We talk about topics that help you take more control and create a bigger future for yourself, your patients, and of course, your team members. Today, my guest is Ben Tuinei. Ben is a dear friend, and we'll be talking about the climate of PPO fee negotiations in 2023. Ben, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Naren.
Thank you, Ben. Before we jump in, can you take a minute to introduce yourself? I think people know you. You're one of the people who started Insurance Untangled, with me, and of course, Jordan and Gary. But just for those who haven't met you yet, tell us a thing or two about yourself and what you do in dentistry.
Absolutely. So I started in dentistry in 2007. I was working for a DSO, a relatively smaller DSO, 50 million DSO in Arizona. And my first job there was, I was hired to negotiate. It was a very specific role where they hired me to negotiate fees with every insurance plan, including Medicaid. And the funny thing, Naren, is that when I was hired, I was given a job description, but when I asked for instructions on how to do this, nobody had anything. They said, well, we heard that you could do it, and none of us have any experience. Hired you to figure it out. And so I kind of felt like I was a pioneer in this space for this group. The first thing I did was I actually put out advertisements to see if I could hire an assistant that had some experience in this area. And out of the hundreds and hundreds of resumes and interviews that I did, I quickly realized that I was all alone in this effort. There was nobody that I could find that had experience negotiating with insurance. So that's my history. As I started there, and then I quickly realized that there was a business opportunity. So I founded my first company in 2009. And since that time, my whole purpose has been helping practices negotiate fees and educating the dental community on how to untangle this mess of allowables, right? Insurance fees, and how to increase them, how to negotiate with them, and how to just raise them altogether so that the bar of payment to the doctors are higher than what they are right now. So that's a little bit about me, Naren.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. This Insurance Untangled podcast is all about helping practices who are mostly or heavily dependent on PPO plans. So in that context, it's really important for us to talk about PPO fees. And remember, our topic today is the climate of PPO fee negotiations in 2023. So let me start by asking you, in 2023, where are PPO fees trending? Are they up? Are they down?
Good question, Naren. I think for the first time in the history of dental or insurance, dental insurance that is that insurance companies are feeling pressure to maintain reasonable reimbursements, right? In the past, especially between 2010 and 2019 or 2020, there was a culture with the insurance industry where they just really didn't care. If you weren't negotiating or had any skills or understanding of how to negotiate with insurance companies, the fee trends seemed to be on a constant decline. Since 2020, it seems like that trend has been reversed, where now we're starting to see unprecedented changes in the industry, where some insurance carriers are still trying to push fees down. But I think overall, the trend is reversing, Naren, to where in 2023, we're even seeing auto increases occurring, which don't really happen in the industry, right? No insurance company is going to willingly come out and say, hey, here's a pay raise, right? They just don't do that. It's always the opposite, where, well, we think we're paying you too much, right? Where they start cutting fees. But 2023, we are seeing light in terms of insurance companies changing their traditional methods, and fees are now starting to inch up positively for dental practices across the country.
Right. So I think it's, about time, right? I guess for decades now, they have been cutting fees.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember back in, I think, late 60s, early 70s, the total, benefit that a person had was $1,000. And even today, there are many plans that still offer that benefit. But a dollar or $1,000 in 40 years ago is $9,000 today. So of course, if they just kept up with inflation, they should have increased it 9x, but they of
Mhm.
course haven't. So I guess I'm glad that finally things are starting to change. So this is awesome.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's good news for the industry.
yeah. So if fees are starting to stabilize and some are starting to go up, what's causing this shift in the marketplace? Do you think it's people like you and me and everybody else in the industry saying enough is enough?
Oh yeah, that I think to me that's the number one reason why fees are starting to change is that you have your other podcasts that you do, Naren, and the theme is that in network participation isn't necessary for the most part, right? And
Right.
so since the pandemic has started, especially with the rise of inflation, like the crazy rise in 2020 and 2021, and the wage wars that have been going on in all industries, right? There's become an extreme intolerance among the dentists in terms of in-network participation. And so the trend right now, another trend is that there's a massive wave of doctors going out of network. So and many of us have been saying this for years, is that's the only thing that's going to cause
Insurance
a
companies
check.
to wake up.
Right, exactly. A system of checks and balances, because
Yeah.
what most doctors don't realize is that the insurance companies need you more than you need them. And now
Right.
that a lot of doctors are dropping out of network as a result of all the education that's going out by you, Gary, and many others, we're seeing this reverse where insurance companies are now thinking twice about willingly letting doctors leave the network, right? And
Right.
now they're being proactive and thinking, well, what do we need to do as an insurance industry to prevent doctors from thinking that they need to drop us, right? But that's the biggest secret, is that the insurance companies have made doctors feel like you need them, right? That is not true. They actually need you more than you need them, because they can't sell dental plans unless they have a massive list of in-network providers, right?
Right.
So that's some of it, is that the massive wave of out of network is causing this change rapidly in dentistry, which is beautiful to see.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's about time, but I think we just have to keep pushing hard, because otherwise they'll go back to what they used to do for decades, which is
Right.
cut fees, or not raise fees at all. Um, where do you think the fee trends will go over the next 5 years? I know it's hard to predict because historically the fees have come down or stayed the same
Mhm.
without adjusting for inflation. But what do you think?
I kind of feel like, when you look at the United States and the politics behind the United States, right? You look at an election year. It's interesting, the two major party system that we have here, Democrats and Republican. We're not going to talk about politics. We're just going to use it as an example. So it's funny because you see shifts, right? You see states like Florida, Arizona, Ohio, that are considered swing states, right? Sometimes during some election years, they're blue. Other years they're red, right? And you see
Right.
this swing of power go back and forth, right? Which creates a system of checks and balances that are great for the government, right? Or great for the people. When you look at the insurance industry, for many, many years, for decades, it's almost as if they were in the presidency, right? If you look at it from a political perspective, they were the ones who were in charge for so many years. And that's because doctors have continued to flock towards in-network without understanding the consequence of what you're doing when you're signing that in-network agreement and how that benefits the insurance industry. Right now, we're starting to see for the very first time a trend in the opposite direction, where more doctors are leaving networks. And so it's kind of like this whole shift in power. And I kind of feel like on a daily basis, I talk to doctors that are really, really insistent on going in network with every dental network. But I also talk to an equal amount of doctors that are in the process of dropping out of network, right? So as long as this trend continues that we're seeing today, of doctors continuing to go out of network with PPOs, and younger doctors coming out of dental school wanting to build fee-for-service practices and being very successful at that. If that trend continues, what we will see over the next 5 years is a continuation of the insurance industry correcting the mistake of having their allowed amounts or their reimbursements at low levels. Now, If doctors change their mind and start to go back to in-network participation, then we're going to experience what we've been experiencing for the last 20 plus years, insurance companies being in charge, right? So you have to have that balance. And unfortunately, no individual in dentistry is going to determine that balance. The balance is contingent upon the collective, right? How the collective group of doctors across the country react to insurance. And the current trend, as long as there's several of them that are not tolerating in-network and they're going out of network, and if that continues, we're in a good place as a dental community in the sense that insurance companies will continue to make these corrections and fees over time.
Thank you, Ben. What about Delta? I mean, they are the 800-pound gorilla or the monster in the room, right?
Yeah.
What's going on with Delta across the country as it pertains to fees?
Sometimes I feel bad for the Delta Dental people because, a few weeks ago, I was at the University of Washington up in Seattle, and Delta Dental was one of the main sponsors for this event that was put on by the dean of this university, the dental division. And the dinner at that followed that evening, it was just a dinner of 12 people, and Delta Dental, a representative showed up from Delta Dental. And the whole night, people were just attacking that person, right? And I kind of felt bad for that person. I was like, man, it's not that person's fault. It's just, they just so happened to be unlucky that the person that was supposed to be here chickened out from Delta and sent a replacement, right? Because they knew this was going to happen. But the interesting thing is that, when you sit Delta Dental representatives in a room with a bunch of dentists, it's an angry venting session, right? Where the Delta representatives are just fielding all this negative feedback. And they've been avoiding this for many, many years, Delta Dental, that is. But what we're seeing today, Delta Dental of Virginia, as an example, they just decided we're going to raise fees. Why? You've never done that in the history of giving a 15% increase to certain doctors, right? Nobody in Delta Dental has willingly done that, or none of the Deltas have done that. In the history of Delta, according to my records or my knowledge, is I've never seen Delta do a global increase that high. Well, the reason why they're doing that is because they're trying to prevent doctors from continuing to drop the network, right? But I would challenge that. So for those of you that get that 15% increase from a Delta Dental, if you got one in Virginia or another state, I would still challenge that. Is that enough, right? And for most of you, that's still not enough. So you still need to continue this trend of going out of network or just canceling your participation. And the reason why I say that is because the reason why Delta Dental is raising fees in certain parts of the country is because of this trend, right? They wouldn't have done it otherwise. Right. But to me, they've been waiting too long. They've been abusing the dentist for way too long, that enough is enough. And that this trend of going out of network, I hope it continues, because that's the key factor in Delta making changes across the country.
That's awesome. Are you seeing more doctors go in network with PPO these days, or you are seeing them go out of network? I think you already said one of the reasons that the PPO fees are starting to inch up or, be revised upwards in a good direction is because of a lot of doctors dropping out. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, so we're seeing both. We're still seeing practices or doctors continuing to go in network with insurance. But we're also seeing, I guess it's a massive amount of doctors that are still dropping insurance, right? I mean, my next 2 calls today are for doctors that want to drop every plan that they're on, right? In 2019, I maybe had, one consultation with a doctor that wanted to look at negotiations and slowly go out of network, maybe one call every 1 to 2 weeks. But these days, it seems like every day I get 2 to 3 calls. So that trend has significantly increased. But if I were to put, a number around what percentage of doctors are looking to go out of network, what percentage are looking to go in network, it seems to me now it's the majority of doctors, at least 60 to 70% from my view, that are considering dropping at least one dental plan, right? And then in terms of the doctors that are going in network, it's the same practice, same type of doctors, the ones that are buying a new practice. or an existing practice where the previous owner was in network. So they're just joining those plans. But almost every single one of those new practice owners, they tell me, well, my goal is to start dropping insurance within 1.5 to 2 years down the road, right? Which I've never heard that consistent feedback from new owners, new buyers before 2020, right? So in the end, Naren, to answer that question, the trend right now is out of network, and it's great to see.
Can you share a couple of tips on how doctors can negotiate fees if they try it on their own?
Absolutely. I know that this is a challenge because a lot of doctors make an attempt to negotiate on their own. And the biggest challenge is them finding who to negotiate with, right? It is not uncommon for you to call provider relations and provider relations telling you that, well, they don't have a provider relations department anymore, right? You have to either submit a ticket online or send an email somewhere or a fax. Most insurance carriers will kind of increase that blockage, right? They'll increase the gatekeeping, if you will, if you call them and say, well, the purpose of the call is I want to negotiate fees. If you get lucky and somebody on the other side of the insurance phone line answers the phone, the question that you should be asking is not, I need to negotiate fees, who should I talk to? Instead, ask, I have a question about my contract that I don't understand, that I need clarification on. I don't have time today, but can you put me in touch with a network recruiter, right? Or a network manager, right? Those are the two titles of individuals that help doctors with credentialing, but those are also the same individuals that help with negotiations, right? So it's very important that when you talk to the gatekeepers, you kind of have to be strategic to not give them keywords that'll trigger them to hit a script that says, oh, we don't negotiate, and then they'll hang up on you. So instead, just ask them to talk to somebody about a question in your contract, but you don't have time today. I would always use that as an excuse. Give them my phone number, but I prefer email, and that way they can get back to me via email. When you have those individuals reach out to you, especially if it's through email, that's really good because, another tip is that you don't want to engage negotiations over the phone. The reason why, I'm not going to share the doctor's name, but a client of ours in Wisconsin had Delta Dental come into practice to negotiate fees because that's what the doctor wanted. So Delta asked questions and the doctor said something that was in violation of his contract with Delta Dental. So this is what Delta was trying to do. They were asking questions to lead this doctor down this path to slip in terms of saying something that now Delta can use against you, right? It's kind of like when you get arrested and police officers say, they read you your Miranda rights. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Negotiators do the same thing on the insurance side, is they will find ways to take your words, twist them, and use them against you. So you always want to keep those communication and correspondences via email. In that way, you have plenty of time to review what you have to say. And you can have an expert help review those emails for you as well, just to make sure you're not saying anything that's going to give the insurance plan leverage to negotiate against you. So though, in the interest of time, those are just a couple of things that come to mind, Naren, on some tips that can help doctors can use to negotiate.
Thank you. Are DSOs still being favored with higher PPO fees?
Not anymore. In the past, what you would see is that DSOs would be able to negotiate with PPO plans that don't typically negotiate with solo practitioners. At least from my experience, that is, Naren, is that, when we have solo practitioners and those doctors are negotiating, directly, and we compare their fees with DSOs that are nearby, what we're finding is that the outcome is the same, right? And I guess this is if you know the negotiating process and you know the pressure points on what to push for, is we are finding that there's no difference if you're a DSO or solo practitioner. I guess the difference is as a solo practitioner is having either professional help or really understanding that game on how to push that envelope towards getting fees that in the past would normally be given to DSOs. But to answer that question, it's a level playing field now where solo practitioners can get as much as, and in some situations, more than DSOs.
Thank you. My last question before we wrap this up, where can doctors learn more about negotiating PPO fees?
Absolutely. So this is what I do for a living. This is what our company, Veritas Dental Resources, does. We have resources on our website. You can check out veritasdentalresources.com. We do a number of webinars and in-person CE meetings across the country throughout the year. So on our website, we are going to add a educational, calendar to let you know when upcoming webinars are going to occur. But of course, on this podcast, the purpose of this podcast is for us to have other experts, right, in this field. So subscribe to this podcast. And what you're going to find is that over the next several months is that we'll talk about negotiations. We'll have people in practices give tips, short, quick tips, which is going to be part of our quick tips episodes. But in the end, if you're looking for some professional help, check out our website, veritasdentalresources.com. Happy to offer a complimentary new patient exam, if you will, just an analysis on what's going on in your practice to help identify those negotiating opportunities. And of course, if you do that, and if you request that consultation, please make sure to mention Insurance Untangled. And that way, if you decide to proceed with any services that we offer, we can give you a discount as part of being a podcast listener. So check us out, veritasdentalresources.com. Perfect.
We'll put a link to that information, Ben, on our show notes so people can easily find you and get a hold of you. As all of our listeners know, and everyone who knows Ben, Ben is a wealth of knowledge. He knows this game of negotiating with insurance better than anybody else that I know. So Ben, thank you for joining forces and working with us on the Insurance Untangled project. I also want to take a minute to thank every one of you for joining us today with another amazing episode of the Insurance Untangled podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share it with your friends and on social media. We also appreciate your reviews. So please write a review for us on your favorite podcast platform. This will help others also discover us. If you are an insurance expert and wish to share helpful information on our podcast, please contact us via the website insuranceuntangled.com. Contact page. To everyone else, until we meet again, have a successful week.